Hi everyone, Mike Malatesta here, and welcome back to the How Did Happen podcast. On this podcast, I dig in deep with every guest to explore the roots of their success, to discover not just how it happened, but why it matters. My mission is to find and share stories that inspire, activate, and maximize the greatness in you. Today's episode is with Ted Bradshaw, an 8-time entrepreneur whose life hasn't always gone as planned. We talk about his broken home life, trying to sell alarm systems to people who didn't want or need them. That's a fun one. Why he's a big believer in serendipity and why he's so passionate about purpose.
I think there's some core pieces to everybody's purpose. We have to understand what are some of the unique talents that we've been blessed with. Just God-given, you're born with these talents and trying to spend time in those areas because you're going to get that positive feedback that you're having an impact.
We also talk about his 6 essentials, Plato's musings, and a ton more. This conversation is deep, it's wide-ranging, and it's been a ton of fun. I hope it matters to you. By the way, make sure you stay till the end because there's a really cool discussion about his money mindset there. Good morning or good afternoon, Ted. Welcome to the podcast.
Good morning or afternoon, Mike. It is morning. I think it's morning for both of us, but who knows when this airs? It might be afternoon or midnight, but great to see you.
Well, I've been looking forward to this for a while. I can't remember. It was a strategic coaches type connection, I think, that introduced us originally, or maybe it was Scribe. I'm not sure. But anyway, I've read your book, liked the book a lot, and have been looking forward to this conversation so that we can talk about the book, but also talk about who Ted is, was, and will be in the future. So let me tell you all a little bit about Ted before we get started. Ted Bradshaw served as an executive with Xerox and IBM, then left the Fortune 500 world to explore the thrills of entrepreneurship. What he found was a long string of success that looked great on the surface. But underneath it all, he felt anxious, exhausted, and stressed, chasing money wherever it led, and wondering why he never felt fulfilled. And along the journey, Ted gained valuable insight into how a person can achieve fulfillment in all aspects of life. And he shares those insights in his best-selling book, Stop Chasing Squirrels. That's a fantastic title for a book, Ted. Here is the book. If you're watching on video, Stop Chasing Squirrels. You should go out and buy that book right now on Amazon or wherever you get your books. Today, besides being an author, Ted lives his passion in helping others find theirs. He's a leading proponent of the entrepreneurial operating system, which is also known as EOS, and some people call it just traction. That's kind of what a lot of people call it. I'm a fan. Ted is a speaker, author, as I said, an expert EOS implementer, community leader, and much more. Ted, let's get started here. How did it happen for you?
I had 2 degrees, Mike, and a dean's list standing coming out of school and thought that it was going to be easy. And I was about to embark upon my adult life and could not get employed. That's how it started for me.
Okay, well, let's dig a little deeper there. So you've got these degrees, dean's list. You can't get a job. What is it? Economy related? Is it your interview skills? Is it what's going on?
Well, I'm gonna blame it on the economy, but maybe it was my interview skills. No, it was squarely the economy. It was the early 90s, 93, 94, and you could send out 100 resumes. You wouldn't even get a response. So 180 degrees from what it is today.
Right.
Yeah. It was awful.
So what'd you do?
Well, I'll tell you, looking back on it now, I went into a pretty dark place because you have these ideas and you're young and then all of a sudden you're supposed to get on with life. And life hadn't gone according to plan until that point. And so I just thought, okay, here's another example of it not quite going the way that you envision it. So I ended up, had to work. I had no choice. I needed money. And so I took a 100% commission job selling alarm systems. And if you recall the movie Glengarry Glen Ross,
I
with
do.
Alec Baldwin, Coffees for Closers. That was the type of environment. It was crazy. I was in it was a 2-week training program, and I was a room. I can remember it vividly to this day. There was about a dozen people in there. And as far as I could tell, if you could fog a mirror, you were invited into this room. And there was, they were decent enough people, but there was somebody that it was so close to retirement or should have been retired. There was others that people that had never worked before, and they're 50 years old. And I thought, why am I in here? I have all this education. What's going on? And so I got trained. The job entailed basically going to someone's home, getting the family together, and trying to scare the crap out of them. That was basically it. And I didn't sell one, not one. It lasted 2 weeks.
Too honest? You couldn't, what was going on? I
think, first of all, there was a mismatch on it wasn't the right target market. These systems at the time were probably the equivalent of what would be a $10,000 to $20,000 system today. And these homeowners were not in a position to afford something like that. I don't think anyone was breaking into their homes. This wasn't, these beautiful neighborhoods, but I also didn't feel right. This wasn't the way to do it. I felt like I was completely taking advantage of people, not trying to help them. And so I just wasn't aligned with who I am.
All right. So you waste 2 weeks of your life doing that.
Yeah.
Who was what was the name of the Alec Baldwin-ish character at that firm?
Oh, I won't say the last name, but the first name was Jack.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
First name was Jack, and Jack was very similar to Alec Baldwin in a lot of ways. Yeah. In the character anyway.
Yeah, of course. It's funny that you mentioned that movie right away, because you mentioned Office Space in your book, which I thought was kind of it was a hilarious sort of similarity of a place that you don't want to work. So anyway, 2 weeks in, and you mentioned as you were talking about that, like things just weren't going right. What, again, I think you said, so what hadn't been going right for you up to then? I mean, when you answered the how did it happen question, it was like 2 degrees, Dean's List. I mean, that seems like things are going right, at least in the academic part of your world.
Yeah, it was. The academic part was going really well. I was also a hockey player, played at a high level. That was going pretty well. My relationships were decent. It was really more my family life. I came from a broken family where there's some abuse, and so I think for a long time I just felt a little bit insecure of my surroundings, being grounded. And I felt awfully alone sometimes, and even though I could be surrounded by a lot of people. And it's not because I don't think, I ended up living with my mom, that we had to, when she got separated from my father, we had to get away from him, basically, is what it was.
I see.
And so I think it's this impressionable, what happens to you between the ages of sort of 1 and 5, when you're just sort of starting to become, somewhat conscious of what's going on around you. And then that period between 6 and 12, which you're very aware of what's going on around you. And what was kind of, I think, psychologically baked into me is there was probably some disruption between 1 and 5. I don't remember it real well, but I certainly remember 6 to 12. Mm-hmm. And just the feeling of somewhat of a, not full abandonment, but just instability. And a lot of, I felt a need for I had to figure out a lot of things for myself. And when you have to do that, and you don't have mentorship per se, then you sometimes aren't sure if you're making the right decisions. And so when you make the decision and it doesn't work out, and then that's where the doubt creeps in. So I think that's what was going on. Everything was going pretty good at that age, and coming out of school, as you say, but then bang, I was hit with this instability again, and I probably there's some trauma connected to that. Yeah.
Sure. So it's like your confidence, you've been building it up through school, maybe, and maybe through hockey and stuff, and then you come out and you get slapped down basically by not being able to get a job, and then getting a job that you don't like, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of people can definitely feel for that, right? Like that's kind of like every circumstance is different, and abuse and stuff is a whole nother level, but every life sort of does that to you, right? It sort of picks
Yeah.
you up for a little while and then kind of slaps you with something you weren't expecting. And it's very hard to keep coming back. And did you mention you had a brother or
No, only child.
only
So
child? So it's just
only
you and your
child.
mom after this.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Just me and my mom. We moved to cities, and we went to a city that she had a brother in, and that's the only reason. And her company would transfer her. She said, here's your options. We have locations in these 6 cities. Pick one. So she picked one, and because her brother lived there, and I didn't, I was 12. Didn't know what the city was. I was leaving all my friends and all of everything that goes on with that.
Yeah.
And we then, of course we didn't have any money. I remember we were, basically living in a 3-story walk-up apartment with no furniture. It took a 1-bedroom apartment, me and my mom, and no furniture. She had to work full time. She was still relatively young. She's passed, but she was relatively young at that time. So she wanted to get on with her life. And so she had to figure it out. I had to figure it out. And away we went.
And have you and has your dad ever come back into your life, Ted? Or
at the end, he passed away in 1996, 97, the year that I was married. And we had a turbulent relationship when we left him, and it wasn't very good. And he was still, of course, I loved him and had a lot, obviously wanted him in my life, but it wasn't good. Towards the end, though, we reconciled, and it was the strangest thing, Mike. I remember going to visit him when I think I was 18 or 19. And up until that time, of course, he was this very imposing, intimidating individual, and he was to others as well. And I remember we were running down the street. I think we were at a bar. And so we had a couple of drinks and we were going to the next place. And, we were fooling around, and he body checked me, a hockey move. He body checks me as we're running down the street, and I body check him back. And I sent him flying. And that was the moment I realized, okay, this man is not, he's actually quite fragile.
Okay.
And so I started to feel compassion for him at that moment. And then I started to forgive and allowed and created an opening where maybe we could connect, even though I was afraid of him for most of my life. Now, all of a sudden I wasn't. And there was that one instant to see that, what, I just knocked my dad on his butt. That's a pretty eye-opening moment. And so he attended my wedding, and we started to connect again. And then he passed away shortly thereafter, largely due to the lifestyle he was leading for the previous 30 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
He died young.
He did. Yeah, he did. And I was his only next of kin. I had to get on a 4-hour flight and had to see him. And they didn't quite. This was amazing. He was in the hospital. I think ultimately it was a heart attack that did it, but he was still, so you better get here. So they used some drug to keep him alive for a period of time. And then I went to the hospital. Okay, I'm here to see him. All right, he's in that room. He was still hooked up to all the stuff. So they hadn't, and he passed. So
he had. All right.
Yeah. It's surreal. So put on a service for him, and the people that were at the service, Mike, these were people I had no idea. The 50 or some people that came to pay their respects. I didn't know any of them. It was the most interesting, he had this other life, this underground type life going on that was nothing I was used to.
That's a real turn of events where you have this, I'm going to use the word tumultuous, maybe it's not the right word, relationship with your dad all those years. And then, you're sort of rekindling it. He comes to your wedding and he passes away, and you basically get the responsibility at that point to make his passing, so I guess, celebrate his life with these people that you don't know. That's
yeah. And there was my mom's family. They lived in the city. So 3 or 4 of them were there, which they of course had they knew the damage he did.
Yes.
So they had no reason to be there to celebrate him, but they were there for me. And so it was this just interesting, okay, you can lean on people and regardless of the circumstances. But yeah, that happened right in around this time that I was having this difficulty coming out of school too.
Mm.
So it was all sort of coming to a head.
So, well, thanks for taking us there. I think it's if I think it's very instructive for people to hear, the kinds of things that other people go through, especially people who end up on the other side looking like they've been successful all their lives and everything's been, great, and you're teaching people how to be great and all that stuff. It's for me, it's just nice to know everybody struggles. Everybody struggles sometime.
Well, I'll tell you, I wasn't planning on going there, Mike. So there's something you did that this was the moment to go there. So thank you for creating that opening.
Well, my pleasure. My pleasure. So 2 weeks selling alarms unsuccessfully. Yep. You quit. Let's pick up the story there.
Yeah. So I took a job with Ford Motor Company. So I did get hired. I got hired shortly thereafter by Ford Motor Company, but the credit arm. And so that job was basically to call people and ask them to start making their payments again. So it was basically what it was. So it was a different kind of sales job. I had to convince people that really were either falling on tough times or just, were thinking they'd get away with something. And it was a great experience. I only lasted 10 months there. But I learned how to compel people that didn't really want to do something to do it for their own benefit, and to do it over the phone was an interesting way to have to do it at that time. And I made a lot of great friends, and I got my first experience of what does it look like to work in an office, kind of the office space environment. And the reason I left, I was doing really well. I was feeling really good, but then Xerox reached out to me because they had seen my resume and from one of the hundreds, I guess, that I sent earlier in the year, and they asked me if I'd be interested in joining their company and go through their sales training program. And so that's what I did. And then it was 5 years there. Great experience. Technology.com boom was happening around that time. I thought I wanted to move into that. And so I joined a smaller company that was in technology, and I really enjoyed that. Then IBM bought them. And then I found myself back in the bureaucracy that I didn't really enjoy at Xerox. And that's when I realized I needed to run my own business.
Okay. So it was an intentional move from Xerox to this smaller company. You think you were thinking that might be a better fit for you, or was there like an opportunity to move up faster? What was it that drew you there?
The opportunity I had with the smaller company was I don't think I would have been able to make a lateral move from what I was doing at Xerox, let's say right into IBM or another larger tech company, because I'd be competing with experienced people in tech.
Right.
So this smaller company, they were willing to take a chance that I didn't have the technology experience, but I had the business development experience. So that allowed me to get into technology and learn it. And make a relatively lateral move. And so that's why the smaller company.
And you were happy there. And then one day the owner comes in and says, "Hey, I've got great news for everybody. This is going to be so awesome for the future. I'm selling the business to IBM." Did it go something like that, or?
Yeah, it kind of. Well, this was, it was, when I say smaller, it wasn't too small. Were they publicly traded? So the smaller company was still publicly traded.
Oh, okay.
I think at the time they probably had 1,000 employees.
Okay, so it was a big company, but on the scale of Xerox or IBM or Ford, it was small.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was nice. I ended up getting some shares, right? So this is my first experience of what equity can do. So I think my shares vested at $10 a share, and then when we had no idea the sale was coming, but IBM basically all of a sudden paid $19 a share, got the board of directors to agree to that. And then boom, next thing you know, no more publicly traded smaller company folded up into IBM at $19 a share. And so that was a nice, I don't know what I made on that. It was $9 a share. It was nice. And, but then again, now I'm right back into this giant bureaucracy. More so, IBM was a notch above Xerox in their bureaucracy and rules and so forth.
And at this point, Ted, still in a sales type position, sales role, sales leadership. What are you doing?
I was doing sales leadership at this point. So it was really more managing people or managing kind of a product line. So that I had moved, up steadily, quite quickly through both organizations. So I worked my way into kind of into that executive position, and I was on a good track. I was definitely on that development track at both Xerox and IBM. Like very well, if I stayed there, who knows, could be in the C-suite today. I don't know that, but that was the trajectory it was on.
I tell that story about myself, similar, that I was on a track to maybe be the CEO of this big company, but unfortunately they fired me. And so my plan wasn't their plan. But I like to believe that my plan could have been their plan. Just wasn't.
Yeah. Well, their plans change, though, don't they, Mike?
Plans change. Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
That's it. That's when I realized we're not, that's not, we have to rely on others in that case. Like we're really relying on others, to stay with larger organizations and trust them, which can be tricky.
Yeah, trusting anyone can be tricky. It's
true.
Yeah. So at this point, if I'm doing my math right, maybe you're, 30 years old or so.
Pretty close. That's right.
Pretty close.
That's it. Yeah. Pretty much right in that 30. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. And you determine at this point that, starting a company or running a company is where you want to focus, but you've got, a lot of, I guess, inertia and probably some other things like a paycheck and perks and benefits and stuff that are probably a little enticing. What's going on and what did you end up doing and why?
Yeah, it's a great question, because you're right. I have a mortgage now. I have car payments. Life has started. And I think the pure entrepreneurs that don't even bother with school and just go out there and do it, I have all kinds of respect. That really wasn't me. I was kind of methodical in the way I went about this. And so an opportunity came up. And I'm a big believer in serendipity. If there are experiences in our life that are occurring, we have to pay attention to them, but they're not just going to necessarily, punch us in the face. It might be a feather on the cheek. And so we really have to pay attention to those. And an opportunity came up. I was now with IBM, and I still had lunch once a week or once every couple of weeks with friends that were still at Xerox. And a serendipitous moment occurred where there was the owner of a Xerox agency. So Xerox would segment their channels. So they would go direct to large companies, and then they would kind of use dealerships or agencies to sell to small to medium markets.
Okay.
The owner of this particular agency, he phoned me up one day and asked if he could come in and meet me while I was at IBM. And I said, sure, come on in. And so he sat down in front of me and he said, are you hiring? And I said, yeah, we're hiring, but don't you have this business? And then he proceeded to tell me all of the challenges he was having with it. And that he was basically going out of business. He wasn't going to be able to make it. And so, I didn't end up hiring him, but what I did do is really see all of the problems in this relationship that Xerox had, or at least I guess the business model that Xerox had created. So in one of the lunches that I was having with my Xerox colleague, I said, I think this could be a good business if this and this happens. And so we asked Xerox for a meeting, and we said we're interested in taking over this agency, and but if or buying the rights to the agency, but this needs to change, this needs to change, this needs to change. And again, these forces were starting to come together. Mike, Xerox was in trouble at this time. This was when they were running into some Chapter 11 issues with some reporting. There was some accounting irregularities. It was not a good time for Xerox. They were in trouble. So there was an opening. They were willing to think outside of the box And to our surprise, they came back with not only what we asked for, but even more in order to. And so so I had this opportunity to kind of dip my toe in the pool of entrepreneurship with two partners with a pretty ready-made business model that all we had to do was execute on it. And I still kept my position with IBM because my role, as it turned out, was the visionary. I wasn't going to be the, using EOS language. I had an integrator partner. I had a sales leader partner. I was the visionary.
Okay.
And my job was to diversify us because we didn't think paper had a very long shelf life. We didn't think the printed page was going to continue for very long. Very wrong. That company's still going right today. But it allowed us we pretty much were profitable from month one all the way through for 17 years and through 2 recessions until I sold my interest to my 2 partners.
And when was it?
That's how I got started.
Okay. And when was it along that path that you committed to it full time or left IBM? Because that's a very interesting straddle you're doing there between being the visionary for a company while holding a full-time job for another. That you don't see that too often.
No, and I'll give full credit to my 2 business partners at the time. They were extremely flexible in allowing me to do this.
Okay.
And so I was basically what my visionary work I was doing, between 5 p.m. and midnight. That's that's how I was juggling it. And I had the energy, I had the desire, so I was prepared to work. There was a period there I was probably working 16 to 18 hours a day for a year or 2.
Okay.
When I made the move, it's when we created our first spin-off business. And so we started a software company called Students Achieve Software. And we were the first in North America to connect kindergarten to grade 12 classrooms to their homes over the internet. This was the early 2000s.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. And so we started to create this system and we had very good success with it. And we ended up, so I was pretty much full on with that for 7 years. And in 2007, we sold it to a private equity group. And it was great timing because right after that, things crashed. So we hit the top of the equity cycle, which right about now, we might be at another one of those peaks, but that's a different story. And then started after that, another 5 companies started and exited, which led me to my EOS work.
So that's 6 companies, or is it 7? 6, 7, right? 7. So the first 2 and then 5 others. And that's an amazing journey. And as I understand it, reading through some of your background information, you kind of were like a medical isotope company. I mean, you were kind of all over the place, Ted. How do you get yourself into all these different things? Is it serendipity every time, or is it?
No, it wasn't serendipity every time.
All right.
No. It was my lack of fulfillment. It was my constant feeling like I haven't achieved success and literally chasing squirrels. It didn't take me much to get myself excited about a business idea. And it didn't matter if I knew anything about the industry, hence the isotope business. Like I have no business being in the medical isotope business, like none yet.
But there
I was. Yeah. So and I do this, in my talk, I use these 8 logos and it's part of my talk. I say, okay, so here, what you see now, these are the 8 logos. These are the businesses I've started and exited over the last 25 years. And then I proceed to say, I'm not sharing this as a badge of honor. I'm sharing this as, my name's, Ted Bradshaw, and I'm a serial entrepreneur. And I've been, sober for 7 years is sort of because in my case, serial entrepreneur, there's another a type of serial person that isn't a good thing.
Oh yeah.
And that's for me, as I look back on it, I was starting these businesses because I just wasn't satisfied. I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew I wasn't fulfilled. And
was it that I mean, you mentioned, chasing money, or I may have mentioned that specifically in the
Yeah.
bio, but
Yeah.
was it like always, was it ego too? Like, was it, I'm bulletproof sort of thing? Or was it, I've got, I still have capability that I haven't used yet? Because most people I
Yeah.
think listening are kind of like, well, 7, that's way more than most. And I'd be pretty happy after 2, especially if they were successful and there was money,
Yeah.
that changed,
Yeah.
the way you think about life day to day.
Yeah. 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 I wasn't, I mean, of the 8, and I include, my EOS business now is the 8th.
Okay. Yep.
6 worked, right? 6 of them made money. And so it wasn't that, yeah, there was a couple of the trying to swing for the fences. Those were the ones, all right, are we going to, this is going to be private jet time if we can pull this off. So there was that.
Yeah.
But realistically, there was more than, even in the first business, there would have been enough to have a very comfortable living and a lot less stress. So there's a couple things I think at play. Ego was certainly one of them, wanting to, hey, look what I did. That was definitely probably at play. But now that I understand where, and in the book I write about, it centers around purpose and finding purpose. I think these were all necessary experiences for me as I worked my way through to finding my purpose. And that's why I think I kept jumping, because I just, in my heart and soul, I knew I wasn't yet doing what I was here to do. I thought I was there with the software. So that school software, I really felt we're making a difference. We're going to improve the lives of students. It's going to improve their lives as adults. And then by extension, it's going to make this world better. So I really felt that. But I also still, the part of it that now looking back, education wasn't the way I was going to do it. So I just, it wasn't quite right yet. So I think that was more, I just wasn't where I needed to be yet. So that's why I did all these things.
And this purpose thing's really interesting to me, Ted, especially because it's sort of in vogue, like serial entrepreneur is in vogue. It's sort of in vogue for people to mentor or suggest to younger people, especially, that, you really need to follow your purpose and find your purpose, and, life will be, rosy. And what you said, it took you 7 different experiences, and that's not even counting, selling alarms, working at Xerox, right, working at IBM, working at Ford Motor, collecting bad debts.
That's right. That's right.
And you were still, to find your purpose, and maybe it wasn't even found then. Maybe it took you a little bit time away from it afterwards. I'd just like you to explore that a little bit. Do you believe that that's necessary? Well, maybe not necessary, but I'll use necessary. Do you believe that that journey is necessary in order for you to really understand purpose? Or do you think that what some people say, like, hey, just find your purpose and, take it from there, is is a doable strategy, I guess?
My experience, Mike, there's some hacks that can be used to give us a head start. And right now, the way that our education system is set up, at least in the West, right? The way our political system is set up, the nature of those on social media that we worship and that we aspire to, this is not set up for healthy, happy, fulfilling lives, from the get-go. So there's a hack to get started, although it's a lifelong journey. I won't call it a pursuit. I like to use following purpose as your guide. And in the book I write about, there are some drivers in our lives that are negative. And I've for a long time considered myself a driven person. And just last week, I asked a group of high achievers, 100 of them, if they thought they were driven people. And then every single person put their hand up. And then I asked them the next question, okay, are you aware of what's driving you? And then we went into a whole different conversation. And then so where I see purpose is it's something that we can start to glean at a very young age. I think high school, this should start where we have a framework of what purpose could be, but then fully understanding that over the course of a lifetime, experiences are going to happen, wisdom is going to start to creep in, and over time, if we stay on the path, we will get as, if we're blessed with a long enough life, we'll just continue to get that purpose more concentrated. It actually becomes smaller and more concentrated, but the effect and the impact becomes much, much larger.
Okay.
So that's how I see purpose. It's not something you wake up in the morning and it's, oh, I found it, I'm good. It takes work. It takes work to uncover it and then to continue to try to focus on it.
I feel like, and I appreciate your opinion on this, I feel like there's a little serendipity to it as well, or a little convergence sort of thinking to it. Like, so, maybe you have this hack and it gets you started, but the experiences of life, sharpen or dull, direct or indirect, and you can often end up in a place that is nothing like where you started. And it's like, this is exactly where I belong. Yeah. Where you never would have done that if you were just solely focused on only pursuing what you thought was your purpose. Does that resonate with you?
It really does. I think there's some core pieces to everybody's purpose. I think there is we have to understand what are some of the unique talents that we've been blessed with. So those are just God-given. You're born with these talents, and trying to spend time in those areas because you're going to get that positive feedback that you're having an impact. And then there's also what are you standing for? I think there's a fundamental from an early age what you stand for as an individual, and it's not what you were taught necessarily. And then it's who are you going to help? What group or individual or type of individual? I think those three fundamentals of those talents, what do you stand for? Who will you help? That's very broad, Mike. And so I think if we embark upon the days of our lives with those three in mind and being aware of them, the serendipity will happen. And it will start to take us in, but we will meet the people we need to meet, and they might pull us in a different direction that we never planned on.
Sure.
But we're in a lot of ways we're following that, heart and soul. I like the definition I use in the book for soul, for example, is there's the spirit. It's Plato's musings on this. There's the head, the heart, and the stomach. And the head's rational or logical. The heart is spirited. And then the stomach is your appetites, kind of the hungers that you have. And so that's the definition I use for soul, and however we fulfill it. I happen to be, I'm a believer. I'm in Christianity. That's my particular belief system, but I run it through the lens of my soul. And I think that's something, the definition of that is the timeless essence of who we are. I think trying to put that in practical measures is just what I said, your talents, what do you stand for? Who are you going to help? I think that's the way we can kind of externalize the soul.
Okay. And in the book, you refer to the soul, I think, as a propulsion system. And what does that mean?
So when we, the metaphors I use in the book, so I call it the purpose platform, and purpose is at the center. And you started off the podcast, I loved it. You said, we're going to talk about, your past, where you are right now and where you're going. That's it. I mean, that's really those are the elements of our purpose. It's past, the present us, and then where are we going? And surrounding that, though, this is where life is going to throw us some curveballs.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've identified 6 essentials of life that if we tend to them, pay attention to them, and nurture them, we have a better chance of realizing our purpose. And those 6 essentials are the mind, the body, soul, nutrition, money, and relationships. The propulsion system, mind is mission control, right? So our mind is where our thoughts are held. This is how we move to action. This is also where some conscious thought of how we feel about the actions we're taking. So it's kind of pushing the buttons, right? I'm going to go this direction. I'm going to think. I'm going to feel this way. I'm going to say this thing. And so it's at the controls. Our body is the vessel upon which we express those thoughts and those feelings or those actions, either physically or through voice or however creation, right? The body enables us to do that. So it's really that soul that is propelling us through the adventure of life. And it's again, it's if of all of those essentials, we can define the mind and the brain, and we can define the body. It's very clear. It's very physical. Clearly nutrition and food is a thing, and money is a thing, and relationships in our life. Soul is that one that is that kind of, it's that invisible essence. But if you ask somebody if they have one, chances are they'll say yes. Ask them to define it, gets a little trickier.
Yeah.
They just feel it,
Yeah.
moves them. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you've never really been asked to define what your soul is. It's just sort of something that not everyone, but a lot of people grew up being told they have one.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we have to feel it. Right?
Yeah.
This is very challenging to describe. Ask someone to describe it, it's tricky.
And where did this come from? These 6 essentials because it didn't sound like you were thinking about these things as you were taking us through the 7 logos, the first 7 logos, because, it didn't sound like you really knew what you wanted. You just wanted more or wanted different or whatever. So where did these come from? How did you distill them?
Yeah. So when I was in preparation for the book, I was borrowing from my experience with EOS. So I've seen the benefit that EOS has on businesses that implement it. And of course, the equivalent of the purpose platform in EOS language is the EOS model. And at the center is the business itself. And then surrounding it is vision, people, data, issues, process, and traction. And they all have their various definitions. And I connected that with, at my son's high school graduation, one of the speakers, I think it was profound to me. And I wish I would have known it when I was in high school. And he said, we don't teach math for the sake of math. We don't teach science for the sake of science, or language arts for the sake of language arts, or social studies. All of these are designed to interact and work together to make you a more complete and rounded student.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was very helpful for me in understanding, well, it's just not about having great people in your business. You also have to have your vision aligned, and so on and so forth. And it just seemed common sense to me for our personal lives. The same is true. And I thought, what are the most important variables of our life? And that's how I sort of defined it and tested it. And I think I've got it. You can put pretty much everything that's important to us in one of those 6 essentials, but they work together. Obviously the nutrition fuels the body. Mm-hmm. Physiologically, if we're meditating, it literally has a calming effect and can lower our blood pressure. So these are all connected. And I wasn't thinking of these things in that way when I was going through the 7 startups, Mike. I was certainly thinking of money as in make it. I was thinking of relationships as in who can I be connected to that can help me, get where I want to go.
Yes. course.
Body. Yeah, I want to be healthy, but I also want to look good on the beach. So these were all very self-centered, independent views of these 6 essentials. And as soon as I started to reframe it from these are the guide rails or guardrails that are going to keep me on track, it allowed me to start to ask the question about money and what is it about money and that essential. And it isn't about the quantity or earning it. It's your relationship with it that matters. And so that's where I started to go deeper in these essentials and what do they really mean? And so that's, again, it was a confluence of my experience over time that allowed me to land on those.
So help me understand that part. It's your relationship with it when it comes to money. What does that mean? What should somebody's relationship with money be?
What should it be is up to the individual, but here's where I would. So when that first job, that Ford credit job, and the mortgage that I had, Mike, that mortgage was $800 every 2 weeks. I think the house was worth $115,000 when I bought it, and I was making $24,000 a year. And somehow I found a way to pay the mortgage, go out for dinner, go to a movie once a week, and still save a little bit of money for 401k.
That seems pretty hard on 24 grand at 800 every 2 weeks, you said?
Yeah, 800, 1,600.
Yeah, 1,600. That's like almost all of your.
Yeah. 20. Actually, maybe it was 26,000. It was like not a
whatever.
lot, right? It was lean. It was lean. Or maybe the mortgage was $800. But it was lean. And I fast forward and I think, my next job, oh wow, it's $40,000 a year. What would I do with $40,000 a year and the life I would have? And you can multiply that by 10 almost all the way up. And I've now, had enough time to spend with some people that are in that 10x category. No happier necessarily, no more fulfilled. And I find that you ask somebody, what's your number? Right? And you ask somebody, is it $1 million? Is it 2 million? Is it 10 million? And if you ask them at various points through their life, you'd probably get different numbers all the way up, And the relationship is, are you comfortable with the level you're at, with your income or with your, let's call it net worth? There are some practical terms here, of course. And does it define how you're feeling about your life? Does it define what you're going to choose to do? Mm-hmm. And so, are you comfortable at that? Like, I've talked to some people that they've just very comfortable with X amount because for them their lifestyle is appropriate. I've talked to others; they're very driven to make more, mostly because they want to give back more, which is wonderful. But again, money for the sake of money, it can be a very, very demotivating place.
Yeah, I'd call it a trap. It can be a trap. It can be
yeah.
When you said that early on in our conversation, when you said that you could feel alone even when you're around a bunch of people, money can make you can have that effect on you too, because if you're always thinking about where you are in relation to everyone else when it comes to money, and you can feel awful alone in it's like, sounds weird, but you can.
Yeah. And it can be, it's a construct as well, Mike. If you think of money, really what it does is it provides opportunities to experience things.
Yeah.
And we're putting a heck of a lot of value on a piece of paper. Like, really, the value of it is just what that paper is.
It's a belief system for sure.
It is a belief. It is.
Yeah.
And it can go away. It can, governments they've eroded our purchasing power overnight. Sure. with their behaviors over the last couple of years. And so if we assign too much of our value set to it, it can really be a hit to our person. But if we identify with the amount of money we have or what our money portrays about us, it doesn't if we have a healthy relationship with it, then we can manage it.
Yeah.
And then we can manage it. And then a lot of good can come from it. And I'm as capitalistic as the next person, but not at all costs.
It's just it's a weird thing. Like, when you are, at, say you have a net worth of 100,000 and you say, man, if I only had $1 million net worth, that would be awesome. And you get to $1 million and you don't often be like, this is awesome. You're like, yeah, but I have a bigger house now and I got kids and I got college. And if I only had $5 million, that would be, so it can be a real, it can be a real race. And you know what else it can do to you? It can mess you up. And instead of you thinking about what more can I do? What is my purpose? You can also be easily fall into, what do I have to do to keep this? What if I were to lose this? What would happen to me? Right? That happens. I mean,
yes,
I think that way sometimes. I mean, I go back and forth. Like I try to stay on there's more to do. There's more impact to have. There's more that, but sometimes you're just like, wow, I don't want to go back to, making an hourly wage, or I don't want to go back to some part in my past where I may have been perfectly happy, but I just didn't have, the resources that perhaps I have today. So I can do that easily.
Yeah. And I think that's very natural and normal, Mike. I still have those thoughts. I find though that when I can put it in the right compartment and really understand what money is there to do, it more of it comes. It's an interesting thing is you sort of let go and it kind of nonetheless it still seems to have an attraction.
Yeah.
But I also know it's a false sense of security. This past year, for example, I call it the silver bullet, and all this. It's just related to, yes, each of these essentials is important to tend to. There's no question you're going to be happier, just given the nature of our society. You will be happier with more money than less. So that is definitely the case, and we've all experienced that. And so I call it the silver bullet, and it took a whole bunch of stress out of my life. I was the person who, if I wasn't doing what I'm doing now, Mike, I very well may be a financial advisor. So I really enjoy it. Like I do my own investments because I enjoy it, and I follow the stock market because I enjoy it. But I was getting twisted up on our monthly budget. I was getting twisted up with if I was looking at the Visa and pulling out the business expenses or whatever. And I was telling this story last week. My wife's, we're attached. Like she has her own card, but we're just joint account, right? So I get to see all of her transactions and she's buying the purchases for the groceries and all this stuff. So, I mean, I don't look at it too closely, but every now and again, I'll see like a store or whatever. I don't recognize it.
I'm feeling you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I go, gee, what do we need? Like, what is that? And it would really, she'd be like, come on. She'd have an answer and okay, fine. So I finally go, this is twisting me up. I can't, it's crazy. I keep looking at these Visa statements every month. So I came up with this silver bullet idea. So two numbers. So Fort Knox and silver bullet. Fort Knox is the kind of what's your number. Okay. So set a date at some point in the future. And what is that amount of money or net worth that you want or need in order, if you didn't work anymore and you could just be free to not work or not earn, I should say, what would that number be? So 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20, 30, depending on the age. So get that number. And then you have to do a little bit of work here to calculate the amount of money you'll need to put away every year and the interest rate, assume an interest rate, kind of basic financial 101 stuff if you're saving for retirement.
Yeah.
So have your Fort Knox, $2 million, whatever that number is. The silver bullet is the amount that if you can save it or invest it every month, you have confidence that you're going to get to your Fort Knox. And if that's $100 a month, $500 a month, $1,000, depending on the situation, $10,000, whatever it is. So for me, Mike, it took all the stress away. So now as long as we have our silver bullet, when all is said and done, I don't worry about what the rest of the family is spending money on. And it's been a game changer for me.
That's reminds me of, well, thank you for that. It reminds me of the book, The Richest Man in Babylon. I don't know if you've ever read that book.
Yes.
But, it's a similar mindset, like save first and then, well, basically that's what it is. Save first and then, And you'll never have to worry if you save first. It's when you save last that you are always having to worry.
Yeah, it's definitely pay yourself first. So that's definitely important. For me, there was another piece to it though as well, is I started to get in my head that if I'm making an extra, so the pay yourself first model is a little bit of, maybe it's like put 10% of your pre-tax income away no matter what. So I had this for a long time. I did that. But as my income started to grow, it started to put pressure on me to put more and more away. And so that's where the silver bullet actually.
Oh, okay. It doesn't necessarily keep creeping up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. And as long as my Fort Knox is okay, like the only reason to creep up would be you're not going to hit your investment.
Yeah.
Right?
Makes sense.
So if I'm comfortable, and this also counters now I have 500,000. So boy, I should have 1 million. It counters that whole thing. So it could just more, because that's the way I know I'm wired that way. So this really takes all right, step back, chill out. Tomorrow's not assured or guaranteed. So the Fort Knox is just a number. Let's enjoy today, but still not at the expense of tomorrow.
I'm glad we got the silver bullet in Fort Knox. That was really good stuff. Thank you for sharing that, Ted.
Yeah.
So we're kind of at the end of our time, Ted. It's been so fun talking to you. I want everybody to, get his book, Stop Chasing Squirrels, learn about the 6 essentials that are in that book and a lot of other stuff, and connect with Ted. I know you've got your own website, tedbradshaw.com, which is very, very simple. Are there other ways that you want people to connect with you?
That's the best way, Mike, but all my socials, so you'll find me on LinkedIn as Ted Bradshaw. Instagram is Ted Bradshaw Co. So please feel free to reach at Facebook, Ted Bradshaw. info@tedbradshaw.com. If someone wants to have a direct conversation with me, I'd be, happy to engage. And so thank you so much. You're a talented interviewer, Mike. Like I said, you definitely got me going some places that I did not have that on the radar this morning. So thank you very much for making it engaging.
I appreciate the compliment. It's the question, really, just how did it happen? You just take it wherever it goes, and that's where it went. So I appreciate you sharing some things and getting into some things you weren't maybe prepared to get into today or weren't thinking you would, but it just made you a human. It was fantastic. So it's been really great. Thank you so much, Ted.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate you.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to the show. And before you go, I just have 3 requests for you. 1, if you like what I'm doing, please consider subscribing or following the podcast on whatever podcast platform you prefer. If you're really into it, leave me a review, write something nice about me, give me 5 stars or whatever you feel is most appropriate. Number 2, I've got a book. It's called Ownership: How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck. It's an Amazon bestseller. And I'd love for you to read it or listen to it on Audible or wherever else, Barnes & Noble, Amazon. You can get it everywhere. If you're looking for inspiration that will help you unlock your greatness and potential, order or download it today so that you can have your very own copy. And if you get it, please let me know what you think. Number 3, my newsletter. I do a newsletter every Thursday, and I talk about things that are interesting to me or I give more information about the podcast and the podcast guests that I've had and the experiences that I've had with them. You can sign up for the podcast today at my website, which is my name, MikeMalatesta.com. You do that right now, put in your email address, and you'll get the very next issue. The newsletter is short, thoughtful, and designed to inspire, activate, and maximize the greatness in you.